growth changes the return curves and priorities. So from starting up through sustainable, some things get much, much better with scale. So some things you might have invested in at stage 2 or stage 3, and they are barely paying back. But when you get to the cycle times, by the time you get to stage 4, like payroll is one of them. Timekeeping is definitely one of those that invest earlier in your timekeeping systems, because if you're planning to grow, because with scale, timekeeping does not get
Yeah.
better. So, and just gonna throw that out there. It just does not get better. And then some things have diseconomies of scale that if you have a certain process that's working now and you scale up that process, it gets substantially worse. And so the return on it goes from being a return to a cost. And so just know where you're at. That's the same for your processes that we're talking about. That's also the same for your leadership, which we talked about with stages of growth, and that your leadership needs to change as you move through each stage of growth. Your leadership focus needs to change. Marshall Goldsmith wrote a great book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and he's got, I think, 21 different categories of things that we do as leaders that were super valuable at this stage. Like I said, like for me, it was like building a project. I learned really pretty early on that high attention to detail, getting everything right, and having a perfect punch list. Me punch as I go, so that there wasn't a punch list coming from the owner or the architect or engineers, was a really successful trait. So then I move into the business management side of things, and of course I got even less training moving to the business management side of things than I got moving into the field leadership side of things, because our industry is phenomenal at training. This is not a negative thing. I love everything about my career and my boss and everything like that. I'm laughing about it because that's just the state of the industry, right? But so I have less, and so now I'm actually trying to run my business unit that I'm accountable for and responsible for. I'm trying to run it like a project. So I'm staying late every single night, and I am literally writing up punch list items of stuff to go do. Thank goodness it's like most of my people liked me. So because that first couple of years was probably really, really rough until I legit realized, like, okay, I you just can't get it all done. So I think all of us learn through School of Hard Knocks, and say, if you can just shorten up that learning curve a little bit, it has a pretty dramatic impact on your people within your company. Because it was what I was doing is I was over stressing myself and over stressing my team, and not necessarily producing any better returns than if I had just backed up and said, okay, what can we reasonably do? What are the priorities? Which that's an important thing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So economies of scale, diseconomies of scale, be aware. Which also is like, they call these your growth cycles and decision points. Again, we talked about this with the stages of growth. But when you're growing, you go through these different stages, and they're all pretty defined stages. And the kind of a good self-evaluation is sometimes you need to keep going forward. You need to double down on what you were doing yesterday, right? Like my running is an example. I just need to do it more. No big deal. I don't need to change anything. I don't need new shoes. I don't need to do anything. I actually just need to do it more. Great. That's the answer sometimes. Other times the answer is I need to make a pretty dramatic change. I mean, think about a Tiger Woods who had to change his stroke in order to get better, continue to get better. And that's a really hard thing to do for a golfer. I would suggest that it's much, much harder to do for a business. Honestly, this is what we do, so I don't know quite how much to describe here.
Yeah, well, it's hard,
hard.
and it's usually the hardest, or feels the hardest, when it's got all the people involved, right? Tiger Woods changing his stroke, yes, that was him deciding to do that for something for himself. As organizations continue to grow, somebody you put, if you're the president and you put somebody in a role, and now you're finding out as the organization's growing that person's just no longer, that role's just not right for them anymore. The role has outgrown that person, or you put a person in a role and now they're literally kind of halting the growth of the organization because they're in. So those are the real decision points in those really painful growth cycles, when No fault of anyone's. Just as things grow, people have to move around so they can be successful in all of their opportunities as well. And that's probably one of the most painful ones, though. At least for me, it always has been.
Yeah, and then when you're deciding on, as a leader, as you're deciding on a few things, you're deciding on your growth trajectory.
Yeah.
Should we keep growing at this rate? Should we accelerate the growth? Should we slow down the growth? Should
Right.
we even retract? What should we do? You're deciding on market strategies. Is this strategy still the right strategy for where we want to go in the future? Is this market still a highly valuable viable market, or has it turned into a commodity? Because every market, for any type of services provided to that market goes from it's an emerging market and people are going, should I even get into that market or not? To okay, it's this booming market and it's exploding. Think about telecom circa late
Yeah.
late '80s, early 2000s. That was a booming period of time for telecom, and then it starts to move into a commoditization stage where you're pretty much ground down to almost zero margins and taking on all the risks, taking
Yeah.
90-day payment terms and all of those things, and for almost no margin. And so you got to depend on decide on where you're going to be in that market. Your org structure has to may have to change and adjust, like Sue just said. Like the people may not, it just may be that they belong in different roles, or you need roles that you never needed yesterday. I was talking to a general superintendent yesterday, and it's like, did you ever think that, when you started out, that all of a sudden you were going to have like a quality control, a quality superintendent and safety, director of safety reporting to you, when you're an apprentice? And, no, most of us didn't think that way when we started out. Your management systems change, your leadership focus changes, and so kind of a good self-evaluation. And this checklist, it's on our website, but is there high stress on the team leading to high turnover? Everybody, construction's stressful, so we're not talking about like you're at peak of the summer and projects, you got one bad project and the team's stressed. We're talking continual sustained stress, that's your normal, and then it starts to lead to higher turnover,
Yeah.
especially in key positions. Your systems are breaking down. You find yourself, on whatever system. It might be your design software or whatever it is, that those are just breaking down, or there's too many missed handoffs on, say, purchasing of materials. You start to see an increase in safety incidents. Hopefully, you're monitoring your near misses, so you're not monitoring the safety things reactively. When the milk is already spilt, so to speak, you start to see a creep up in the incidents, or the near misses ahead of time. You have increased amounts of rework, which will show up as you may not be tracking it, but you're going to hear about it anecdotally. You're going to see it in material overruns. You're going to see it in labor hour overruns. Inconsistent profitability. It may not be, and it's going to show up first usually at the project level, and it may not show up all at once, but it will start to show up. You'll have a few jobs do bad and a few jobs do good and a few jobs, and so you start to get this higher variability on your WIP statement, and then that bleeds through, and you have good years and bad years as a company. That, by the way, that's not totally normal. I mean, it's normal enough that people say that it's normal. No, it doesn't actually have to be normal. You have decreased cash flow. You have more, increased customer complaints or lower customer satisfaction. Customers that you thought were always in the bag, that they were always coming to you, now, start to entertain a couple other competitors or something like that. You have inconsistent growth. So it's kind of the self-evaluation categories to really start with, to say, am I at a growth inflection point? And it's a hard leadership decision to say, is it because I'm not being disciplined and doubling down on the things that I should be doing at this stage of growth, or is it because I've outgrown those tools and those systems, right? That's a really, really hard thing. If I say on the running thing, if I haven't run for 6 months, I don't need a new pair of shoes. I actually just need to keep running. Which kind of brings us, kind of full circle to the end, and where we started. You can't run your business like it's a project, but there's like kind of always this in between. And so as your kind of career progresses from, say, a PM role to the CEO, you go from prioritizing how to get it all done. You need to manage all these projects. They've got completion dates. They've got all these requirements, and your magic as a PM, as a superintendent, and really a lot of the roles, accounting, you have to figure out how to get all of these things done in a certain time frame. And as you move to the CEO, you start to a chunk of it starts to become prioritizing what should be done, and very importantly, what shouldn't be done, and communicating that super clearly to the team of what we're not going to do, and being absolutely that clear, like we will not do this. That's a hard transition to make, and it's not like this step that goes from 0% to 100%, right? It's this progression throughout your career, and that's a lot of what Marshall Goldsmith talks about, and what got you here won't get you there, and it's always a balance, and it's really hard to go do, and it's not always obvious, when you should apply one method or the other method. So anyways, I think that's about it. The last thing I want to talk through, well, I guess actually, Sue, on this one, how have you seen this in your career? I mean, you've seen a lot, so how have you seen this changing prioritization?
Yeah, it's probably the most interesting progression of this is watching when, again, in my experience, I've seen people come up through the ranks. Everybody that wants to be CEO just realize that 99.9% of the others are going to be disappointed because there's only one CEO, right? But when you've got a good management in place or good leadership in place, or I should just say leadership in place, and you start to see where you've got again in this model, you've got a bunch of good PMs and you've got a CEO and a leadership team that really kind of sees what's going on. If you tend to be that hollow in the middle, right, where maybe there's not enough leadership between the high end and your PMs, you start to see where the PMs are being um, I'm going to use the word coerced, whether that's correct or not, but being asked to move up into things that maybe they're not ready for yet. David and I laugh. There's a situation that I've known that I knew a guy for a long time, right? Great foreman could work his crew up into a frenzy, man. They made money every single shift. So they moved him up into, in my world, into a field superintendent. So he was working with several foremen, and he could motivate a field crew like you would not believe. So made a bunch of money there. Well, then they moved him up into being a job superintendent, which was, you superintendent or maybe first time project manager, right? A lesser complex job, not a tough owner kind of thing. And so we move this person into there, and they're doing okay, but again, they're getting farther and farther away from the love of the field and the things that they do, and being actually moved more towards these management type positions. And next thing still doing okay. So move up into a larger project management position, and now you start to see, kind of the wheels on the bus start to fall off. And a lot of that's just, moving people too fast out of their career progression into a trajectory that's just not right for how they want to manage the work, how they want to live, where they can be successful. Their level of prioritization tends to remain at the field level, and a lot of times we want to push career progression with those modes of prioritization, and sometimes just asking people what they want to do does a lot more for getting people in that balanced mode than pushing them to the outer edges of maybe a mode that they're just not comfortable in. They're not going to do very good work there because it's not where they want to live. So I've seen it work really, really well with some
Right.
mentoring and coaching. And then I've seen it work really poorly with that. Here's the carrot, right? It's more money. It's all these great things. And then, the person just kind of has no, I mean, they just kind of fall apart, really not any fault of their own. So um, it's good to know how this works and really pay
Yeah.
attention on an individual basis.
Which that brings us to back to the developing talent. And I mean, and this is exactly what you just talked about. And unfortunately, in that scenario, they lost a good person, and probably honestly took some years off of his life. I mean, he was paid well, but took some years off of his life because he was running at a stress level that he shouldn't have been running at because
Right.
he was out of his operating range. I mean, it's just like taking a piece of equipment out of your operating range. But so when you're kind of running through this, and this is back to the talent value stream of planning your talent needs, recruit to hire. That's a really important process. Get them on board and get them into the role where they're being productive in the role they were hired for. So those first three stages are pretty, they happen pretty quickly, and they're pretty, they're very critical. But the bulk of it is like this whole middle part of the retention and development piece. And a lot of these exercises, like we just talked about, it's a lot cheaper and a lot more effective to go watch a person you just talked about, to watch them struggle in a posted exercise that has no consequences, right? That posted exercise is over whenever the bell rings, 3 p.m. or whatever. It's a lot better to be able to back up and watch them struggle there or massively succeed there, and then be able to help plan what's best for their development, what's best for their next career path, and everything like that, and have those hard conversations with them. So a lot of and as we get into the next session after this, we're going to talk about the job roles and getting really specific about the job roles and trying to keep these things together. But just consider that you are developing talent and you are evaluating talent while you are improving, making improvements to the machine, so to speak. You're making improvements to the people. So anyways, you're waiting to see like who's really good at, identifying improvements to make in their area. Who's really good at the fill or kill? Who's really good at 5S? Who's good at motivating the team to keep everybody moving forward? Who's, you're looking for all of these different people, and then you're thinking about the organization you're going to create in the future, and that's essentially what you're building with this. So does that
Yeah.
summarize it
Yeah.
decently,
No,
what you
I
just
think that was
described?
I think that was well said. And really, it's remembering that to keep people, right, you got to find out why they stay. You got to find out what makes them tick. You have to know, yeah, just like the things David was saying, what they're, who's good at the 5S, who's good at, all of these different pieces. And then looking at developing those people, there's kind of three pieces to that. One is there's training, and training is the technical stuff people need. Every time there's a new piece of technology, everybody needs to be trained. Your CEO needs to be trained on how to use the new iPhone, right? Whatever that is. So there's training, which everybody needs. Then there's professional development, right? Who are those people that want to get really super good at what they're already doing because that's where they want to be? That's where they bring their value to the organization. And then who are those people that want to look, maybe again, get their, kind of raise their head a little bit more and go, you know what, I would like to lead this organization and its people into the next level, the next generation. And that's the leadership development, right? Where we're helping people not just inside these exercises and all that, but to really sit back and look at the bigger picture. Some will want to learn about it and go, oh, that is so not for me. And others will want to learn about it and go, let's go, right? So all of that retention is about that
Right.
continued, really continuous improvement of developing people, and how you can watch them, learn from them, see where they really shine, and help them to really continue to shine inside the organization through many types of developing and aligning of roles.
Which then brings us to our kind of last little piece on prioritizing talent development, is this planning stage of going, here's our current state, here's our people. And when we talk about capabilities and outside and capacity, I mean outside of some of those big things like we talked about, a major equipment purchase and stuff, that's actually even though it's a big dollar thing, it's a lot easier, because like once you buy that piece of equipment, it's going to do the thing that we want it to do. It's got its specs, it's got all those things. So once that decision's made or not made, it's there. People have a lot longer runway on them. And they will may leave the company. They may leave a role because they got promoted, because of a retirement, because of turnover, recruitment. So it's really hot market out there. Sometimes just awesome opportunities come along. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen. So you got to sit there and say, where's my current state of my organization, and where am I going to be in the future over a period of time, and really back up and look at all of those different categories and start mapping that out. That's really what goes into the planning stage. And again, when you're at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, planning for talent looks a lot like, what do I need to do to staff this job this week, this month, the next 6 months. I'm not saying it's that short of a time horizon, but it's a pretty narrow thing, and it's usually about like, what do I need to staff this, or like they're getting overloaded in accounting, I need to add a person here, or purchasing or something. You start to get up and do the larger contractor, stage 4, stage 5, stage 6. You're starting to look out quite a ways and starting to say, okay, I need to hire 10 field engineers, because every year, just like clockwork, because 8 of them are going to stay, and one of them will make it up to an ops manager role over a 15-year period of time. And I just know that that's how I'm going to continue to staff from there, and I'm planning on my growth. So that's a lot of what we're going to get into next. It's a lot of what we cover with the talent value stream, roadmap development and all those things. But any comments here, or should we wrap up and let people know what's coming next? And,
yeah, I think we let them know what's coming next.
Okay, yeah, we've been at this coffee conversation for a while, but there was a lot more here than when we kind of outlined and said we're going to talk about prioritization basics. There ended up being a lot more here on prioritization basics when you think about the talent, both the what needs to be done and the systems and then the talent. Yeah, there was a lot more.